So again, building off of this Photoshop file, I'm going to, again, include a little additional detail to this. You can see we've added the reflection. One other thing to make it, again, a little more believable is adding shadow for some of these people. The way it's been rendered, it's already a very deep shadow, so it covers up a good portion of shadows of people walking. But we do want it to seem as if the shadow kind of goes across this light area and even starts to bend up on this hand railing. So, I mean, this is a little more advanced than your typical condition. So I want to just show you a more kind of simplified version of doing this. So again, it's important to add shadows for people so it doesn't appear as if they're floating in the composition, right? So it's kind of hard to tell exactly where they're standing in this. So it goes a long ways, especially if it's on a nice, bright material without any other kind of shadow being projected onto it. So again, I want to go ahead and add an additional kind of ground plane. So I'll show you, again, kind of a nifty trick to even create something like that. So let's go ahead and look for our kind of wood decking piece here. So I'll go ahead and maybe make it a little bit narrower in this case. I'll flip, do perspective to make it wide here. I'll scale this part down some. Right, let's do a little bit more. Make it a little bit wider there. Bring that kind of closer to something like this. Maybe it's not as crazy like that. And let's just go ahead and scale it all together, kind of a little bit bigger. And then I'll just put it behind it so it actually looks like it, right? So let's just make it a little bit flatter, right? Obviously this isn't perfect, but we want to at least show enough of that projection happening. Okay, so what I want to do is use this person, right or hold down control over the thumbnail to just select those pixels, create a new layer, use the paint bucket tool, hit make sure you have black as your foreground color and just go ahead and bring that and brush that in. And deselect, hit Control T to go to the free transform. And what I want to do is, again, flip vertically so we can see that they're kind of matching, right? And now I can, again, instead of using the perspective, I like to use the distort, so I kind of, it's like a freehand perspective tool. So now we can start to kind of get that idea. And we kind of still kind of want to keep those things parallel with each other so that way it doesn't seem like it's off like that. And this person, it looks like that right foot is off the ground, so it kind of works in our favor that there's that gap there. If we want to, again, kind of get a little bit closer to it, we can always kind of continue to skew it to get that condition. We'll put them actually below the person. I'll drop it down a little bit, just using the arrow keys. And I always like to kind of, again, these shadows usually aren't like a pure black, right? You can still generally see the ground plane underneath it, whether it's wood or concrete or any other material. So I'll go ahead and change the blending mode to multiply. Then I'll hit Control U and I'll start to lighten it a little bit. And that usually does a really good job of blending it like in a better way than just changing the opacity of it, right? Like we still want it to be fairly dark, but we still want to be able to see through the shadow and see those textures a little bit better too. So that's a very simple way to start to create those shadows. So let's go to this composition and do a similar thing, but again, we have to kind of give this idea that it's wrapping around. So let's start off with the girl. I'll use my move tool to actually find the layer by right-clicking. Use this, so here's that little girl. I'll go ahead and use that again. Control, click the thumbnail to just select that. Create a new layer, fill it in with black. Put it behind her. Control T to distort it. I don't know why, there's something over there that I don't need, so let me see if I can just select around it and delete it. There, let's try. There we go. So in this case, we might be able to get away with just actually rotating it, right? Because again, it's a very kind of deep shadow going off to the right. I'll still use the distort to make it seem like it's still on a plane. And again, it's just one of those things where as long as you get it to match and look believable, it goes a long ways. So again, I've got it kind of rotated that way. I want it to actually start to bend and warp up there as well. So I'm just going to do one more thing. I'm just going to kind of get as close to matching as possible. So there's the shadow of the girl. We can use the lasso tool to basically kind of follow. Let's turn it off and just follow this part of it. And I'm just going to take a large window around it, turn it back on, and I'm just going to hit Control J to basically create a new layer of just that. Right, so there's that part. I can use that same selection to delete the shadow. And now I've got them basically split in half. So now I can take this one as it starts to wrap up and hit Control T. And now I can start to actually use the warp tool to help, maybe. This might be one of those cases I can finally get it to work. Actually, I'm just going to use the... Let's try distort. I don't... Right, so I can kind of start to do it that way to give it that illusion that it's starting to bend up. So I'm kind of just taking that corner and kind of making it look like it does that. And now I can, I'll just go ahead and merge both of those back. I'll change the blending mode to multiply. Control U to lighten it a little. And this is something good to see, like how this shadow is relates to this one. Notice that it does have a slight blue hue to it, so sometimes you want to go ahead and go to colorize, select something closer to the blue tone, maybe either desaturate a little, make it a little bit darker, hit OK. Oops, it doesn't look like it worked, so let's try that again. Oh, there we go. So you can make it much lighter, desaturate it a bit. Oh, it looks like I almost had it perfect. Right, so right around that range, maybe it's slightly darker. That starts to appear a little bit closer. Maybe I just have to adjust that. Yeah, so it's a little bit more on the purple side. So I'll go ahead and hit OK, and I can just go ahead and erase this part. because you really don't want those shadows overlapping much. So I'm getting very kind of meticulous with this, but there we go. So that starts to get that idea, and we want to do the same thing with the mom as well. So I'm going to use V to go to the move tool, right click to find that person, right? And again, I'm going to do the same thing. More of it's actually, because she's taller, is going to be on this hand railing. So I'm actually going to do the majority of it like that, and then do the rest is kind of projecting over. So again, I'll give it that fill color. In this case, it's actually going to look very similar. Right, I just want to Control T, flip horizontally. Maybe I put it around there. Make it slightly smaller. So I have to kind of follow this to figure out where I want to actually cut that. I'll hit Control U to, again, lighten it a little bit, pick a similar color. We'll most likely see this a little bit better, and once I change this blending mode to multiply. And now again, I want to use the lasso to trim it. I could even just simply move it that way and then do, so let's just hit Control T, go to distort. It's a little tricky, but we can eventually get it to at least match a little bit better. Might be one of those things where we just have to kind of, again, cheat it a little bit, because again, it's really, you aren't going to see a whole lot of the actual foot. We'll just see part of it slightly kind of going off to the edge. Remember, some of this is going to be behind the girl, so I'm actually going to place her over here. And now I can do, again, let's mess with the hue and saturation a little bit more. I'm pretty happy with that. And again, I'll just get rid of this part of it. And then the last thing we want to do is notice that there's those holes there. Obviously, this is just projecting on the metal part, so I can go to the bridge itself, hold down Control to select that part, Control Shift I to inverse that selection. Now go back to my shadow of the girl and go ahead and hit delete. So now the shadow obviously isn't overlapping with those holes. So now we start to get that idea of the shadows getting projected onto that as well. So yeah, it's definitely a much more advanced shadow than you would have to usually do, but again, you want to give it that illusion as if that shadow is actually projecting onto something, especially with this kind of curving handrail.